The best-selling watch in the history of the world is not a Rolex. It's not an Omega. It's not even an Apple Watch. It's this, a $12 rectangle of plastic designed in 1989 that has not meaningfully changed in over 35 years. Casio makes around 3 million of these every single year. That's more than 3 times the entire annual output of Rolex. Over 100 million of them are out there. It's been worn by astronauts on the International Space Station, by a young Barack Obama, by soldiers in half the armies on Earth, and, as we'll get to, by some far darker names too. And here's the thing that should stop you. Every other watch in the world competes by adding more precision, more features, more prestige, more toughness. This little thing won by doing the exact opposite. It did the bare minimum, brilliantly, for almost nothing, and then never changed again. So the question is simple and genuinely strange. Why does the world keep buying the same plain, unchanging object year after year, decade after decade? To answer it, we need to crack 3 questions. 1. How is a $12 watch both accurate and able to run for 7 years on a single battery? Because that's harder than it sounds. 2. Why did never changing make it unbeatable instead of obsolete? And 3. How on earth did the very same watch end up on the wrist of a US president and the world's most wanted man? Stick around, because the answer to all of this is one idea that runs completely against everything else we think makes a product great. The principle: winning by subtraction. To understand this watch, you have to understand the moment it was born into. In the 1970s and 80s, something called the quartz crisis had just turned the watch world upside down. A cheap quartz crystal, it turned out, could keep time better than a mechanical watch costing thousands. Accurate time had suddenly become a commodity, nearly free. So the interesting question was no longer, how do we keep good time? It became something much sharper. What is the absolute minimum a watch needs to do at the lowest possible price for the largest possible number of people? And the Casio F91W is the best calibrated answer anyone has ever given to that question. Here's the idea that holds this whole video together. Every other watch competes by addition. The F91W won by subtraction, and then by something almost no company has the discipline to do. It froze. It did exactly enough. Made itself cheap and utterly reliable and available absolutely everywhere, and then it simply stopped changing. Its single greatest feat of engineering is that it hasn't been improved in 35 years. Think of it as the Nokia 3310 of watches. Not the most capable thing you can own, the most dependable. The one everybody had. The one that refuses to die. Or think of the humble paperclip, or a plain white t-shirt, objects that reached a shape so completely solved that changing them could only make them worse. Perfection here means having no reason left to change. It launched in June 1989 from Casio, already a giant of calculators, and the tough G-Shock, designed by a man named Ryusuke Moriai as his very first watch. And here's a lovely little twist about how legends form. For about a decade, half the world confidently believed it came out in 1991. Why? Because Wikipedia said so. A BBC article repeated it, and then Wikipedia cited the BBC, each one quoting the other, the error echoing back and forth until it looked like fact. It took until 2019 to correct. Even the birthday of the best-selling watch on Earth became a myth for a while. Now, do the minimum cheaply sounds like the easy way out. But making a watch that's genuinely accurate and runs for 7 years on one tiny battery, all for the price of a sandwich, is not lazy at all. It's real engineering. Let me show you how they pulled it off. Quartz accuracy for pennies. Start with keeping time, because that's the one thing a watch cannot get wrong. Inside every F91W is a tiny engine Casio calls Module 593. At its heart is a minuscule quartz crystal that vibrates at a rock-steady frequency, and a cheap integrated circuit that counts those vibrations to mark off each second. It's the same basic principle as a quartz watch costing 100 times more, just mass-produced by the million with none of the fancy finishing, and it works. The F91W keeps time to about 30 seconds a month, roughly 6 minutes a year, which comfortably beats any affordable mechanical watch. And that exact same module, the 593, has been the beating heart of every single version since 1989. It's the same engine as the quartz clock on your kitchen wall, shrunk down and strapped to your wrist. But an accurate circuit is useless if you're forever changing the battery. So how do you make it last for years? 7 years on a coin. This is where the quiet genius sits. The F91W runs for a rated 7 years, and in real life, often 10 or more, on a single coin-sized battery, the CR2016. And it pulls that off through obsessive low-power design. The key is the screen. It's an LCD, a liquid crystal display. And the beautiful thing about an LCD is that it barely uses any power at all. It doesn't emit light the way a glowing screen does. Instead, think of it like a set of tiny window blinds. It simply twists to block or let through the light already in the room. And blinds don't burn electricity just to sit there open. That's why the numbers can stay on all day, every day, for years, sipping almost nothing from that little coin. And this explains the single most mocked feature of the entire watch: that famously feeble green backlight. People love to complain that it's useless in the dark, and honestly, they're right, it's terrible. But it's terrible on purpose. Producing actual light is the one thing that would drain the battery fast. So, Casio kept it deliberately weak, rarely needed, so that 7-year battery life survives. The watch's most ridiculed flaw is actually a completely coherent engineering choice. One CR2016 coin cell, 7 years rated, in a watch that weighs just 21 grams, a brilliant, tiny, thrifty engine. Now it needs a body, one that's just as cheap and just as unbothered by the world. The body and the everywhere. The case and strap are made of resin, engineering plastic, with only the caseback and buttons in steel. And resin is a small masterstroke of its own. It's feather light, at 21 grams. It's comfortable against your skin in any weather, hot or cold. It shrugs off knocks and never corrodes. And, most importantly of all, it is astonishingly cheap to mold by the million, identically forever. And that cheapness unlocks the real weapon: distribution. Because it costs so little to make, Casio could put it everywhere. Supermarkets, petrol stations, airport kiosks, corner shops, discount chains, and now every online marketplace on the planet. It's under a shirt cuff at 8.5 millimeters thick, it never snags, and it's sitting by a till near you right now for the price of a couple of coffees. Cheap engine, cheap body, sold everywhere. And when an object gets this good and this cheap and this available, something strange happens to it. Something its designers never planned. When a product becomes infrastructure. At some point, the F91W stopped being a product and quietly became something more like infrastructure. Think about what happens when a thing is reliable enough, cheap enough, and available enough that almost everyone, everywhere, ends up with one. It stops being a purchase you think about and becomes a default, like a plain white t-shirt or a Bic biro. And once an object is that universal, it takes on identity. Serious collectors now wear a $10 Casio on purpose, right next to their Rolexes and Omegas as a kind of knowing badge. It turns up on Barack Obama's wrist, in Stranger Things, in Squid Game, on astronauts aboard the space station. But that very same universality has a shadow. The thing that makes it a pop culture icon, it's everywhere, on everyone, and is exactly the thing that gave it the strangest and darkest chapter of its story. 3 million a year. Over 100 million made. One design, essentially frozen since 1989. That's not a watch that got lucky. That's a watch that found the single most efficient formula in the history of the wrist, and then had the discipline to never, ever touch it again. It stopped being a watch you choose and became a watch you simply end up with. And when 100 million people end up with the exact same object, sooner or later it ends up on some very surprising wrists, including two men who could not possibly be more different, and a footnote in one of the most controversial prisons on Earth: the presidents and the wanted men. First, this watch is woven into your world already. You probably owned one or a cousin of one as a kid. It's in the airport, at the petrol station, in a drawer at your parents' house. And the logic that made it win, good enough, cheap, reliable, forever, is the same logic behind the pencil, the paperclip, the plain white t-shirt, the Nokia that wouldn't break. The F91W quietly teaches you something about why certain humble objects outlive all the flashy ones around them. Now, the strangest chapter. And I want to be careful and factual here, because it's often told as sensational nonsense, and the truth is more interesting than the hype. Because this same cheap watch has sat on the wrist of a young Barack Obama, and on the wrist of Osama bin Laden, reportedly the only branded item he was ever seen wearing in public. And that is not a coincidence in the sinister sense people imagine. It's a consequence of the one thing we've been talking about all along. This watch is everywhere. Here's the documented part. During the War on Terror, the F91W's long battery life and simple alarm made it a tool that some bomb makers used as a timer, and Western intelligence noticed. When The Guardian published leaked Guantanamo Bay briefing documents in 2011, they revealed that possession of this exact watch was listed in training material as, and I'm quoting the reporting here, the sign of Al-Qaeda, something that could count against a detainee. The watch reportedly appeared around 150 times across detainee assessments. But now, the detail that tells you everything. One detainee, on being told his cheap Casio marked him as a suspect, pointed out something devastatingly obvious. The prison's own 4 chaplains all wore the same watch, and that's the whole point. Profiling someone by an F91W is like profiling them by a Toyota pickup. The watch isn't sinister, it's just ubiquitous. It's on presidents and soldiers and shepherds and 8-year-olds, and yes, some genuinely dangerous people. Precisely because it's on everyone. The same 100 million unit ubiquity that put it on Obama's wrist is what put it into that briefing document. It's a mirror of everyone who wears it, which, by now, is very nearly everyone. Why it never dies. So, back to our $12 rectangle. It outsells Rolex several times over, not despite being basic, but because it's basic. It did the minimum a watch needs. Accurate time for 7 years, in 21 grams, for the price of lunch. And it did it so well that there has never been a good reason to change it. Every other watch chases more. This one understood in 1989 that it had already reached enough. And then it had the nerve to stop. That's why the world keeps buying the same plain object year after year. Not because it's the best watch, because it's the most finished one. A design with nothing left to add and nothing worth taking away. And it isn't going anywhere. Still 3 million a year in the age of the smartwatch, now with translucent cases and bio-based straps, but the same 1989 heart beating inside. Here's a thought to leave you with though. The F91W proved that good enough forever can beat the best. But there's a whole other kind of watch that bet on the exact opposite. On being the most overbuilt do-everything instrument imaginable. And the most famous of them went to the moon. That's a video for another day. So here's my question for the comments. Was the F91W your first watch? Or is it secretly still the one you reach for? I want to know how many of you are wearing a 100 million unit icon right now and never thought twice about it. And if this changed how you see that little plastic rectangle, the subscribe button costs nothing and genuinely helps the channel. There's a card on screen for our film on the watch that went to the moon, the exact opposite philosophy and an even wilder story. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.